Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about why narcissistic relationships can be so addictive for so many people. And I think this is something that's almost like not nearly discussed enough because of the fact that we're not paying attention to why it can be so difficult to break free. So when I was running my private practice and seeing people one-on-one for quite some time, many years, I saw many people coming into my office who were struggling with a divorce, and that may be why they sought out counseling. And then they came in, sat with me, and then ended up saying, I want to go back to somebody who's done, all these different things that are clearly really unhealthy patterns of behavior and not sustainable for a relationship, like people who are actually going through narcissistic abuse. And what struck me the most is how forgiving they were of all of these really tumultuous, chaotic things that were taking place, and how it was almost like they couldn't break free internally first. And so they didn't want to do the work to really heal and get better until we targeted working through this almost in a similar way that I target the subconscious mind when it comes to addictive patterns or behaviors. And I want to talk in here about the key features that lead to narcissism being this addictive thing that we can't release, and then what we can actually do in terms of healing. So first and foremost, how does narcissistic abuse mirror an addiction? And there's a couple of things that are really important to pay attention to in the bond, the trauma bond with a narcissist. And the first part of this is that there is so much intermittent reinforcement, right? There's so much sometimes you get the good side, and when it's the good side, it's really, really good. And sometimes you get the chaos, the pain, the put downs, the diminishing, the manipulation, the gaslighting, all these different things, right? But if you look at gambling, gambling is very much an addiction for some people. And when we look at the mechanics of gambling, there's no chemical that you're ingesting, there's no substance that you're using, but there is the neurochemical components of gambling. And what's so interesting is that research about gambling itself shows that the gambler addict's brain actually has a stronger dopamine reaction and lights up more when the gambler thinks about gambling than when they are actually doing the gambling itself. And so what this tells you is a couple of things in terms of how addictive intermittent reinforcement can be. Number one, we have this really strong induced response that puts everything on this sort of high when we think about something that we are attached to, right? And number two, that intermittent reinforcement of not knowing when we're going to get the outcome that we're looking for can be extremely addictive. And there's this experiment that was talked about years ago that was sort of all over the internet for a while that I reference a couple times on this channel, but it just talks about rats and basically the power of intermittent reinforcement. So what these researchers did is they put rats in this sort of rat park type of place, and they saw that the rats were mating and enjoying their lives and playing and doing things. And then they put pellets into these little dispensers where the rat could push the lever and this food pellet would come out. And they would do this intermittently. So they would do this, originally the rats would push the lever, take the food pellet, eat the food, and then go play and go back to enjoying their lives. But then when they started doing it intermittently, putting the food pellet so that it would come out every 5th time, every 20th time, every 87th time, what they found is that the rats would actually give up on their normal day-to-day activities, grooming, mating, playing, exploring, and they would just hover around this food pellet lever and almost be addicted to this, trying to see if the food pellet will come out, trying to sort of stay there and see what would happen. And, there's a similar effect in terms of the actual dynamic of the intermittent reinforcement that we can have in relationships. And of course, that's along a continuum. But when we look at the narcissistic relationship, you see that that's even stronger because of, and this is the second main component here, the fact that the love bombing is so strong, right? So the neurochemicals that can be induced by the intensity of the love bombing, how good somebody feels, especially in those early stages, is really real, right? And the third thing that's so important to pay attention to is how much the subconscious mind gets imprinted in the early stages of relationships. So it actually sets the tone for addiction, right? And what I mean by this is, let's say we take Bob, okay? We'll pretend there's Bob. And let's say Bob is 21 years old, okay? And Bob has grown up and he went through a lot in childhood. He's got a lot of really negative beliefs about himself. He's got a lot of unmet needs in his life, and he's not in a happy place. So let's say Bob's internal dialogue all day long is like self-critical. He puts himself down. He feels stressed about not getting his needs met. He doesn't feel a sense of security in his life. He doesn't feel a sense of purpose. He's not feeling good. So his thoughts all throughout the day are eliciting negative emotional responses and thus negative neurochemical reactions. And same with his unmet needs. He's got unmet needs. And so his subconscious is trying to alert him by giving him negative emotional feedback. But he doesn't know how to solve for that problem or bring that information to the conscious mind's awareness and do something with it. So instead, you just see that Bob is in this position where he feels these constant negative feelings. And then let's say Bob at 21 years old on his 21st birthday goes and has his first sip of alcohol. And I'll put like a trigger warning in here for anybody who struggles with any sort of substance issues or alcoholism. But let's say that he takes his first sip of alcohol. And as he continues to drink, he has this experience of his inhibitions being lowered, his internal dialogue calming down a little bit, stilling a little bit. And now he feels this freedom from that incessant negative set of thought patterns throughout the day. He feels this release from the pain of his unmet needs. And in fact, he actually feels a greater sense of self-esteem and self-confidence and lowered inhibitions, which then allow him to emotionally connect better, feel more secure, feel more comfortable with other people. So what's going to happen from that experience? Is it simply and only the neurochemical impact of alcohol that's creating the potential addiction that could take place for Bob? No, it's Bob's already existing neurochemical space and how alcohol seems to solve for that. So if he's in this constant pain, but then he gets some of his needs met, then he releases some of these internal dialogue patterns when he's under the influence of alcohol, he's going to feel this immense euphoria compared to what he's used to being, right? His baseline has changed. So now we have the context for addiction to occur, right? The stronger the experience is relative to what we're used to, the more likely we are to get addicted and attached to that substance the first time around. Now, here's the interesting thing when it comes to narcissism. Often the people who end up being attracted to narcissists are the people who are struggling with their own self-esteem and self-confidence first, which makes them not pay as much attention to the red flags. And I'm not saying this from like a judgmental space at all. I'm saying this from like literally case studies of firsthand experience and what the research demonstrates. And what we see is people who struggle with boundaries, put themselves down, are really prioritizing other people and deprioritizing themselves, overly empathetic, over caring for other people's feelings, not caring for their own feelings and considering themselves and their needs enough. These are the people that actually tend to be most drawn to narcissistic relationships. So we have an individual who already is in a space where when somebody gives them all this attention, makes them feel seen, loved, cared for, considered, all the things that they're not giving to themselves, if your baseline is down here, it feels that much better, right? So it feels like this escape from the sense of self. And it feels like all these things I'm not able to meet within the relationship to myself, the narcissist is coming along and meeting. And now you get imprinted more strongly. And the stronger the emotional ties to something, the more they program and permeate the subconscious mind. And I'll give you an example of this too. So if we take, a person who is, let's say they have a critical coworker, and they keep feeling kind of unsafe by the critical coworker. And there's the repetition of the person being critical, and it just feels uncomfortable in an unsafe environment to work in because the person uses really harsh insults, and this happens on a daily basis. Eventually, you're just going to feel this feeling of unsafety at work around that person. But let's compare that to, God forbid, but let's say that somebody gets in a car accident, right? You can feel like you're totally safe in cars your entire life and then have one negative event, and the intensity of emotion that's elicited from that one negative event creates almost like an immediate subconscious set of programs where now you've got this association that cars are unsafe. You don't want to get back in a car, or if you do, you maybe even visibly see yourself shaking. And so we can get imprinted really strongly based on the level of intensity that's elicited as an emotional response to something. So we have this other mechanic of addiction that can take place for narcissistic type relationships. If you are not getting your needs met in relationship to self, and somebody comes in and just really meets those needs that are really unmet, really makes you feel seen and special and wanted and valued, that person's imprinting you in the dating stage of a relationship. And now when that gets pulled away and then the intermittent reinforcement kicks in, well, now you're in a situation or dynamic where it's like your subconscious mind has been primed to experience that relationship like an addiction. It's been primed to feel like these really strong emotional reactions, feeling really good when that's there, and then feel really bad when that's taken away. And it actually hooks the mind and our neurochemistry and the way it's produced into this relationship in a very intense way. And then the mind also does this last thing that's important to notice as well, which is the mind then tries to get its needs met in the fantasy. It thinks about, what if we could just go back to the dating stage of a relationship? What if we could just go back to when things were so great? And the subconscious mind, if it can't get its needs met in the present, often gets its needs met by fantasizing about the future, or really like thinking and feeling about nostalgic memories of the past, because those things still elicit emotional reactions. So it like simulates the needs being met from the mind's perspective. And so what happens is you can get into a relationship dynamic where when somebody's not getting your needs met in the present, you think about the fantasy, oh, they will, or what if I just change? What if I just become better this way or that way? Then the narcissist will make me feel loved again, will make me feel special and important and seen. Or, oh, I remember how great things used to be in the past. And, I think we can get back there again. And so it's really easy when there's this addictive component. We make the rationalizations, we make the justifications, we ignore the red flags. We don't pay attention to our boundaries being violated. We don't pay attention to the unhealthy patterns in the relationship, because the reticular activating system of the mind will filter out the red flags when it's really focused on getting needs met that are unmet and that we're disempowered with in the relationship to ourselves otherwise. And so we have this context where, because of all these different features, the intermittent reinforcement, the love bombing, the imprinting of somebody really getting your needs met that are unmet, then the mind filtering out the red flags, the mind projecting into the future, the mind pulling memories from the past, all of these things lay the foundation, the groundwork for this really addictive component to take place. And this is part of when we're trying to break out of these narcissistic relationship dynamics, we actually have to treat this like an addiction, to first create that separation between ourselves and that person, to then be able to do the work, show up for our inner healing, and then be able to move on from things that are not serving and that are not very healthy any longer. So anyways, I have a whole course about this. I go into this in a tremendous amount of detail, the steps, the strategies, exactly what to do, how it works. And you can check it out for free for 7 days. I highly recommend it. And you can do that by clicking on the link below. If you want to go a step further and sort of gather all the details and information from there, there's a workbook, all kinds of stuff in there for you. So I hope this makes sense. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next video.